Welcome to Health 2020. I'm Dr. Sello Motaung. Ordinarily, you'd be hearing a voice and seeing someone saying, I'm Dr. Doreen Monakis. Sadly, that voice is permanently silent. Dr. Monakis passed away on Monday the 7th. We still all are battling to come to terms with the fact that she's no more. Now, even though we only started working together just over 6 weeks ago, she had become an integral part of our family here at Health 2020 and has left an indelible mark in all of our minds. It was impossible not to notice the passion that she had for improving the health and well-being of the public, even outside of Health 2020. This is some of the recent work that we came across in one of her social media channels. Please, let's take a look.
So I had spoken to Dr. Clementine Chiwane. She's a clinical psychiatrist in the private sector, and she deals with all mental health care issues, depression, bipolar mood disorder, like you name it. Yesterday's topic, as I mentioned, was focusing on depression and grief. It's quite a serious condition, and by serious condition meaning if it's not treated, it can actually be quite detrimental and harmful. I had asked Dr. Chiwane to elaborate on exactly what depression was and if there are different types of depressive conditions or episodes. And she had mentioned that yes, depression is a mood disorder, as we mentioned, and that there's different types of depressive episodes. The most common that we are seeing or that we experience is the major depressive disorder. But there's other types. PMS was one of them. I thought that was quite interesting. Bipolar mood disorder as well can have, one presenting with depressive incidences.
So before her departure, she was hard at work preparing for this episode. Now, this is an extract from the very last interview that she conducted for Health 2020. Let's take a look.
Hi, Gracia. Thank you very much for joining us. Thank you for making the time to share your story with us. Please tell us about your journey with depression.
I could say I was diagnosed when I was around 24. I'm 35 now. So the official diagnosis was around when I was 24. I did show signs before that, starting from about high school already. But yeah, you know how it goes. When you're young, you're a teenager, I'm not going to admit this, otherwise, there's this whole stigma. And, before that, people didn't really know about it. People didn't really talk about it. So it's something that you dealt with by yourself. If, you feel depressed or anything like that, it's, you just say, get over it. Do something to make you happy and it'll be okay. I was extremely sad a lot of the times. But people get sad and they get over it. But mine was just a continuous thing. I didn't want to get out of bed anymore. I didn't want to see anybody anymore. I didn't want to talk to anyone. Pretty much all I did was sleep. So if I either slept too much or I just didn't sleep at all. I had these bouts of insomnia. And it also started making me physically ill, physically sick. I got sick with anything. If somebody stood 2 meters away from me and they had the flu, I caught the flu. I started suffering from migraines. I had so many things that were happening with me.
So major depression, or depression as we all know it, is one of the commonest mental health conditions that we face today. And as we heard, can be quite debilitating if not adequately managed. And in fact, it's regarded as one of those conditions that are called the silent killer. So today we've decided to continue with what Dr. Monakis and the team had started, and we're going to focus our discussion today on depression. But before that, let's take a look at this.
So I decided to go to the doctor and, I said to him, I don't feel that great. Something's not right. I don't know what it is. I keep getting sick and please help me. So he said to me, I think this is not physical anymore. I think it's something more psychological. So he went through that test, the questions that they asked you, and I checked everything on the box, absolutely everything. And then he said to me that, So he said to me he's going to refer me to a psychologist, which I did not want to go see, because I said to him, I'm not going to go speak to somebody who's going to tell me exactly what I know is wrong. They're not going to be able to fix me. But he actually had to threaten me. He said to me, listen, if you're not going to do this, I'm going to stop being your doctor. So we need to get on a road to recovery and get your mental wellness right. So you need to go see this woman. And if she feels the need, then she's going to send you to a psychiatrist. So that's how it started. I was not interested in seeing people, but I could be up 1 minute and in the next minute, I don't know what's wrong with me. I could just start crying, and then he'd ask me what's wrong, and I'd say, you know what, I don't know what's going on. I don't know what's wrong. My weight was up and down. Sometimes I would get really, really thin. You know, I get on this exercise thing and all of that, and I'm like skinny. And then the next minute it's like, whoa, I like increased weight a lot. One thing I did do as well was drink heavy. I drank a lot. It was like a comfort for me, because I mean, you drink, you're intoxicated, not necessarily to get drunk, but to get in that zone where I relax, and you know, not knowing that my problems aren't going away while I'm there. I'll wake up the next morning and they'll still be there. But for me, right there and then, that was my comfort. And then opioids and prescription medication, pain medication. That was also, it was also something that I was taking a lot.
I think the lockdown has tested all of us to some extent, and the worst part about lockdown, our normal ways of coping were discarded. We had to let them go and learn of new ways. Remember, at first you would go and talk to somebody, and then even Nati, as our counselor's accessibility to us was limited. So lockdown was really testing. So I think what we can do going forward, the available, I know it's difficult because not everyone has got access to that, but for now, the technology is at least bridging the gap in terms of making sure that people get support, people get services. So we are also using our TV in terms of giving out information. And some of us, I know, I've also seen my colleagues who are using social media to educate people, to empower people. I remember in the beginning of lockdown myself, on my page, I started something just to keep people going every day for the first 21 days of the lockdown. I was motivating people, giving people motivation every day. So we can use technology to our advantage and see how best we can bridge the distance gap between us. To support someone that is going through depression, firstly, let's get education. Understand, remember, no two people go through depression the same way. So taking that time to understand the person that you need to support, including understanding the condition itself, firstly. Then after, respond to their needs. A lot of the time we try to rescue our people, yet it's not what they want at that time. Let's not rush to rescue, but rather let's be patient and sit with them in their dark place and be their companion in that space and move with them when they are ready. A lot of time what we do, we quickly want to get them out of that space, and we cause more harm than good. But let's rather stay with them in that space. Say, I'm here with you. I'm by your side. I'm with you. When you're ready, I'll move with you.
So support of someone with depression is really important, but equally important is preventing people from getting into depression in the first place. So today we have with us a specialist psychiatrist in studio who will help us unpack all that we need to know about this condition called depression. But before that though, we need to take a quick break. Please stay with us. Welcome back. As I said, we have a specialist guest who's going to help us unpack all we need to know about depression. And it's a great pleasure to welcome Dr. Dikobe Kalani, who's a specialist psychiatrist in private practice based out in Pretoria and the Centurion area. Welcome to Health 2020.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
All right. Perhaps let's start from the beginning. I mean, many people in the clips that we've played have spoken about depression, depressive episodes and what have you. Let's just clarify or define exactly what depression is. What are we talking about?
So the word depression is loosely used to say I'm feeling sad, but in clinical terms, in mental health, when we say somebody has a clinical depression, the actual term is major depressive disorder. And not only is it about a low mood for at least 2 weeks every day for the better part of the day, but it also is accompanied by other symptoms of your energy becomes drained, you become lethargic, you lose interest in things that you used to previously enjoy, you become socially withdrawn, you have difficulties with sleeping. Earlier on, the lady in the clip said there were times when she would sleep too much or not sleep at all, so it disturbs that. Also disturbs your appetite and your cognitive functioning. You become more forgetful, you become inattentive, and it impairs your concentration.
So I mean, we do know that it's, and as I said in my introduction, that it's one of the commonest mental health conditions. It is quite common.
It is.
But who gets depression? Who's likely to get depression?
Yeah, anyone, for as long as you're human. But there are identified risk factors. So if you are genetically loaded, meaning that there is a family history of depression or any other mental illness, people who are in extremely stressful environments, people who don't have a good social support system can then be susceptible to developing depression. There are some people whose depression is brought on by the use of substances, you know, yeah.
So let's go back to that, stressful situations that you mentioned, because I think it's an important one, that it's said that, it's important that people are able to deal with stress quite effectively so that it doesn't tip, so to say, into depression. Please just take us through that, concept of stress management.
Yeah. So life itself is stressful. There are many life events that can induce a stress reaction in the body. Right now, we are all living through this COVID-19 pandemic, so everybody's stress levels are very high. There's also a lot of grief that is going on with people who have lost their lives, and their loved ones. So grief can also trigger a major depressive episode, but also loss of jobs, financial strain, our students also, especially the matriculants, seeing that the year is going by and not really a lot is going on, that can also trigger a stress reaction in the body.
Yeah. Interesting that you spoke about grief. I mean, it's quite relevant in these days, despite the fact that obviously we're all grieving, around the loss of, our colleague, Dr. Manakisi. But, in this period, I think there's a lot of people that have experienced loss of their loved ones as a result of COVID. Please just take us through back again. I know you mentioned it briefly, the link between grief and depression.
Yeah. So grief or bereavement is a normal reaction to the loss of a loved one, and not only a loved one, but a significant person, a colleague or a friend. And there is no prescribed time period for grieving. So even as a psychiatrist, I'm not quick at diagnosing a major depressive episode when somebody is still going through grieving. But when one is grieving, it should not impact negatively on your social and occupational functioning. And once that happens and you are no longer able to function, then it warrants the diagnosis of a major depressive episode.
So let's just go back a little bit and talk about, the clinical course of depression. And of course, we're talking here about somebody that's been, diagnosed with depression. What's the sequence of events, and what actually happens if this is not, properly managed, as it were? Yeah.
So initially, a person would say, for the longest time, I just have not been experiencing the amount of happiness that I'm used to experiencing. And then I started realizing that I didn't even enjoy the company of friends and family. So people start becoming socially withdrawn and isolated. And then when you're alone, the mind will then start giving those negative thoughts, where you start feeling that life is not worth living, where you start getting some guilt feelings or feeling like you're being punished for something maybe that you did, and that is why you're not really enjoying life as much. And then as those negative thoughts escalate, they can then lead to you developing suicidal thoughts. And really the end stage of a major depressive episode is suicide.
Which is something that we definitely don't want. Now, we've spoken about, the risk factors and the causes for depression. Let's take a moment and talk about prevention. How do we prevent people from getting into depression before we start talking about treatment?
It's really about holistically taking care of yourself. You need to be both healthy physically, mentally, and emotionally too. So get into the habit of expressing your emotions, talk to people, avoid isolating yourself. Yes, some people, because of their personality structures, it would be difficult for them to function that well in a social setting. But even if you're not physically with somebody, but just keeping in touch with people, on social media or communication platforms, that's how I think that a person can really try and take care of their mental state.
What about, wanting to access treatment and wanting to even talk to people? There's the concept of, high functioning depression, as it were. Just take us through that and perhaps, what people can do to avoid that.
Yeah. People don't always notice that they are now having a depressive episode, but people around them can then pick up if there's a change in one's behavior and levels of functioning. But if you are in touch and in tune with your own emotions and you can feel that really my levels of happiness are not quite where they're supposed to be, please don't be afraid to reach out and talk to somebody. If you don't have a family member that you are close to, you've got a friend. People belong to churches. They've got counselors in their churches. There are clinics that have social workers. There are psychologists and there are psychiatrists like myself. Reach out to people. Fortunately or unfortunately, I guess fortunate, with COVID-19, we've all been pushed into using technology. There are so many of my colleagues on social media who are offering their services. Reach out to them and seek help.
Which I guess, brings us to the next point of treatment. Let's talk a little bit about treatment and support of those that are undergoing treatment.
Treatment really depends on the staging of the illness. So the mainstay of treatment for major depressive disorder is a biopsychosocial spiritual approach. Biological, it's with medication if medication is warranted. Psychological, that's the psychotherapy with the counselors and the psychologists. And then socially, we look at the social support system. And then spiritually, it's self-explanatory with your beliefs, depending on your belief system. So we tailor-make a treatment to fit the client and to fit the symptoms that are presenting, because it's not only about a depressed mood. There can also be difficulty sleeping. There can also be anxiety.
Yeah.
So we look at the medications available to
Who
us.
needs to be in hospital, and is it necessary that everybody must be in hospital for treatment?
Not everybody, but people who firstly have a major depressive episode with psychotic features, meaning that their reality testing is off. They would have delusions or fixed false beliefs of things that are not really there. So such a person would have to be hospitalized, and a person presenting with suicidal thoughts would have to be hospitalized. But also a person whose functioning has been quite significantly disturbed would have to be hospitalized.
Right. Just lastly though, support. Just take us through, who, especially people around those that are, undergoing treatment, and perhaps support groups out there.
Yes. Charity begins at home. So it starts at home with your family and then your circle of friends. And then at work as well, as colleagues, we need to be checking in on each other and be that support system at work. Also with cultural settings, there are certain people who belong to certain social groups that can give them the support. Our churches can also be very supportive. But yes, importantly, there are support groups that are available. And because of the pandemic that we are living through, the social support groups have now also moved to social media. So if you can find a support group for people who are suffering with depression, it's great.
All right. Dr. Dikobe Kalani, thank you so much for your time and your insight into this, and we hope to be with you again sometime in the future.
Again, thank
All right.
you.
Thank you, guys. Now we're going to go for a quick break, and where we're going to wrap up and leave you with some very important messages coming out of the show. Please stay with us. Yeah, thank you so much for staying with us. Now, here are those key messages that we promised coming out of this show. Now, if you have a low mood or feeling depressed, it's important that you take care of your body, as we heard. Regular exercise, go out there and be active. Eat healthily. Make sure that you get enough sleep. It's very, very important. Avoid high usage of drugs and alcohol to try and, forget about the stuff that's troubling you. It's important, as you heard, to connect with loved ones and friends and express what you're grateful for. Now, it's also important, I think, especially in these days, to take a break away from all these negative news. Now, learn new relaxation techniques like, meditation or yoga. And as we heard, please ensure that you seek help as early as possible. Now, if you've been diagnosed with depression during this pandemic, very, very important that you continue taking your medication and all forms of treatment as prescribed, and connect with your support group, because it's very, very important to get support, as we heard. And also, save all of those helplines on your phone. Now, if you're thinking of death or suicide, please, please, please seek professional help. You can have access to a counselor on a daily basis from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. at 011-234-4837. Alternatively, the 24-hour SADC helpline at 0800 456 789, or the suicide crisis line at 0800 567 567. And again, we like this one. Don't give up. You're not alone, and you definitely do matter. So that's all we have for you today. But before we close, I'd like us to please take a look at this.
I'm Dr. Doreen Munakisi. Diabetes is one of the biggest health problems affecting people of all ages in our country.
Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the show. I'm Dr. Doreen Munakisi. Sello, I'm very excited we are covering hypertension during COVID-19. In my time in practice, I've encountered so many people with hypertension and hypertensive complications. I'm hoping this will be an insightful session.
The abuse of women by their intimate partners is one of the most forms of abuse facing women today. Springtime, compliments of the new season, but be warned, experts have warned against an intense allergy season this year.
I think what we also did here is that hypertension is a dangerous condition and that compliance and adherence to medication is important.
All of us are flooded with information and lots of misinformation about COVID-19. This can be confusing, frustrating, and at times overwhelming. Unfortunately, that brings us to the end of today's show. I'd like to thank our special guest, Dr. Mugansi. Up until next time, bye from me. From my side, Salam Khani.
That was sadly the last goodbye from Dr. Munakisi. She will be sorely missed by all of us here at Health 2020. May her soul rest in peace. And we want to thank you all for the messages of support that we've been receiving throughout this week and continue to receive. And again, thank you so much for watching this show. Please remember to continue sending us your questions or comments via SMS, WhatsApp, Twitter, Instagram, or Facebook as displayed here on the screen. And we're off today. Until next time, please be safe.